that isn't literally there, or ignore something that is there and depreciate it, and make a summary statement of that, that's called interpreting. Part of this, therefore, takes the alternate form. Each period of history is different. Each one has its own laws working itself out, and therefore you can't compare one period of history with another, because each is unique. Each has its own conditions operating on the moment. And as a consequence, there is no point in comparing one against the other, since they're all unique. And since they're all unique, obviously it follows from this that therefore all cultures are relative to the perception of the people within it. Now, people who are taught this belief obviously walk away from that with somehow they have to, from this year after year after year, they then have to come to some view of themselves and the mind that they have. Now, what kind of view do they have of the mind and themselves? Well, no comparative analysis, because each period is unique, conditions are different, each particular culture goes through its own phases. There's no point in comparing different phases and different things. Therefore, just as you might say each person views something from their own viewpoint, and no one has a better viewpoint, so too each one of these can be represented as a period of history, and therefore everyone is unique, and therefore there's no need to look for anything beyond that. Therefore the view they have of the mind is knowledge is perception, because this is all perception. It's all relative to the observer. What does that do then? That gives them a view of the nature of reality, which is you can't get close to it, you can't understand it, it's not an object worthy of reflecting on. For everyone has their own particular and totally unique. Therefore, the view of the mind is that it's an interesting kind of phenomena where everyone has their own private world and their own private dream, which is very much like what Wittgenstein said. And therefore the view they have of themselves is inconsequential. That's the steps, these are the steps to nihilism. Nothing matters, there's nothing significant, there's nothing worthwhile to throw all your energies into, because there isn't anything there that's worthy of it. Now, let's go further. Went through this, right? We talked about Cicero, Petrarch, Pico, Ficino, the split between the trivium and the quadrivium, the division within the state, peace in the state, don't challenge. We don't challenge you, you don't challenge us. The next level of our great culture is, therefore, let's have education and entertainment that never touches on anything vital. Because what's really vital? What's really vital is whether or not the mind is capable of seeing into the nature of reality. That's the only thing. Therefore, the real issue is the role of reason. Role of reason in the Neoplatonic and the Hellenic world is that it must be cultivated or it's not going to be utilized to its fullest capacity as a vehicle for seeing. Now, as we noted before, Petrarch on the one side, Ficino and Pico, behind it all is the issue of Christianity. Now, what's most interesting about our age, and I think we're going to go through the most interesting period of time that I think is possible to participate in. I can't think of any period more exciting than this one. Christianity has emerged after 2,000 years. They first had the view that all of their works together came together as a unity. Then, a series of criticisms. Every remark I make, by the way, comes from theologians who are reputable theologians who represent various denominations. Then they shifted to, no, you can't say there's a unity to it all since Paul is so much different and Paul and John are so much different from the others. Therefore, there's really just a unity of three of the Gospels, the synoptic. Well, then there was an interesting work by several people, especially Bultmann. He said, look here, there's something else going on here. And that is, since you've now separated out Paul and John, from the other three, Mark, Matt, Luke, there's something extremely interesting going on. And that is, even though you might say these fit together, synoptic, they fit together, they all joined into a unity, that's really not the case. Later thinkers came along and said, because, look here, because when you contrast Luke with Mark, you find something quite remarkable. Mark has parables, they're esoteric. Luke has parables, they're not esoteric, they're not addressed to a small community, they're addressed to mankind. Therefore, they're exoteric, open. Mark, esoteric, confined to a small group. Mark has parables that are esoteric and miracles and the Passion. Luke does not. He has something that Mark doesn't have, and that's called the sayings of Jesus. The sayings of Jesus are the material found primarily in the common material that's found in common material that's found in Luke and Matthew called Q. Mark does not include the sayings of Jesus in his gospel. Now a whole body of scholarship has been running on this point now. And what is this sayings of Jesus? What is its origin? Why did Mark leave it out? What's the significance of these statements, especially since the Q remarks or the sayings of Jesus can be addressed at 50 AD? Whereas, of course, the first gospel is somewhere around 70 AD. The latest analysis of the sayings of Jesus, the Q statement, shows very clearly that it belongs to a body of literature, wisdom literature, that is Cynic and Stoic philosophy, Hellenistic philosophy. And that Jesus in Galilee and Decapolis, which are Hellenistic cities and founded by the Greeks, was the center of much of Cynic and Stoic philosophy. We know the names of them. We know where he visited. That's where he did most of his good work. When he went to Judea, he got in trouble. Therefore, there's a whole new view of Jesus. And what does it mean? It means this, you see. This whole tradition had the assumption that Christianity was the larger body and included Judaism. It was perhaps even a reform movement or a revolt against it. Whichever position you take, that was the connection. There was an intimate connection between these two. Modern scholarship, again, not by people who are outside of the faith, but people who are reputable in the field and represent certain denominational thinking of Christians, now have to come to the conclusion that this is not true. This is a myth. What have they come to now? Something far more interesting, that Christianity is a part of Hellenistic philosophy. Now that's staggering. Because that means then, if you want to study Christianity, you should study the parent from which this is a part. You should try to discover how did Christianity get such a Stoic and Cynic philosophy.